To our presentation today, optimizing optimum health and performance through nutrition, and Michael Watson is going to be our speaker today. So if you would do one thing for us, Michael will go through the presentation, and if you have questions, please jot them down, because he'll take your questions at the very end. We want to make sure that we get through the presentation, which has a wonderful and very informative information in it. So with that being said, I'd like to bring up Nicole Duga, who will introduce our speaker today.
Hi everyone, as you've gotten all my emails that I sent out, Michael is a good friend of mine. He graduated from the University of Florida, that's where we met. He has a Bachelor of Science in Applied Physiology and Kinesiology with a specialty in exercise physiology. He's also a certified strength and conditioning specialist. He used to train me, and where I get a lot of my fitness and nutrition information from. He's currently a first-year medical student at USF. He's interested in pursuing a career in preventative medicine. So if you're interested in talking to him about that, he has plenty to say. But Michael has certainly made a big difference in my life as far as the way I eat. I've changed my diet hugely in the past year, and pretty much all the information I've gotten has been from him. So I think you all will learn a lot today, and I hope you enjoy.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Michael Watson. I'm currently a first-year medical student at USF. My real interest is going into preventative medicine. This is something that we don't see a lot of nowadays. We have a very reactive system. And a lot of preventative medicine is about diet, exercise. It's about lifestyle changes. So I've been lucky enough to shadow a couple of physicians that are already doing this preventative medicine thing, already implementing the diet that I'm going to talk to you all about today. I also got a chance to, in my personal training setting, help my clients lose weight through nutrition. So it's something I'm really passionate about, and hopefully you guys will be too after I deliver this presentation. So the plan of attack for today, we're going to start by talking about why nutrition matters, why this is important. We're going to go over the theory behind what I'm going to refer to as perfect health diet. I'm referring to that my nutrition as perfect health diet today for two reasons. One, a lot of it is based on a book called Perfect Health Diet by Paul and Xiao Geminette. They're two PhDs. And the other reason is I'm trying to get across an idea that it's more of like a new healthy than a diet. Diets have a lot of like negative connotations nowadays, unfortunately. Think like yo-yo dieting. And really I'm not trying, when you're trying to eat healthy, shoot for this. Because there's some confusion. We have people trying to eat healthy, but they don't really know exactly what that healthy is. So then we're going to talk about the details of the diet, what's in, what's out. We're going to talk about inflammation, and then fats versus carbohydrates, how to implement, and then finally at the end, we're going to do some question and answer. So, all right, so before I start, a lot of people have a lot of strong opinions about nutrition. It's this hot subject, and there's going to be people who, and I've done this presentation before, and there's people who are whispering under their breath, cursing me, and it's because you may have been eating certain foods for your whole life, and I say that maybe you should limit them. So really, I'm not trying to tell you you have to eat like this way, or this is absolutely the right way to eat. I'm just going to throw some knowledge out there, throw some information, and you guys sort through it and decide what's best for you. So why worry about nutrition? Well, there's performance today, and then there's tomorrow. I like to put the focus on how nutrition is going to benefit you today, right now. Because people have a hard time like conceptualizing 20 years from now, and they say, this food's going to cause cancer, and it's as humans we just kind of put that off. So today, nutrition, a proper diet, it should optimize your mood. It should improve your mood. It should improve your energy levels. It should improve your focus throughout the day. It should optimize your body composition. So maybe gain more muscle, lose more fat. If you're underweight, gain a little weight. Okay. And then there is tomorrow. It's something we should all worry about. We see nowadays we have this epidemic of morbidity. So people are living longer. The quantity of life is going up, but the quality of life at those final years is going down. We see morbidity just refers to living in a state of disease. Not worrying about nutrition is not a good idea. The default, if you just kind of go with the flow in this country, is disease, is problems. We see 70% of Americans are overweight or obese. 3 out of 4 deaths are caused by either diabetes, heart disease, stroke, cancer. All those conditions are labeled chronic preventable illnesses. Obviously, there's some types of cancers that don't fall in that category, but the big cancers have been labeled as preventable. So we see Center for Disease Control recommends diet and exercise, but again, what is the diet? What is the exercise? Today we're going to talk about the diet. To start with some theory. Perfect health diet, it's what I'm talking about today starts with an evolutionary perspective. So in that way, it's similar to the paleo diet, which is, you hear it all the time. There's a lot of people jump to conclusions about it. But the strong point of the paleo diet is that it starts with an evolutionary perspective. And the diet that I'm going to be talking today starts with an evolutionary perspective as well. So to explain that, this is a great quote. Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. So everything that we are today biologically is a result of the millions of years of evolution that shaped us. So if we look at nutrition, for 2.5 million years during the Paleolithic era, we were hunter-gatherers. So we ate only the things we could hunt and gather. Only in the past 10,000 years, with the start of the agricultural revolution, did we start living off like a grain-based diet. Did we start eating things like dairy? You can't milk wild animals, but if you domesticate them, you can have dairy products. And then even more recently, past 100 years, 200 years, we see the industrial foods, processed artificial ingredients, stuff like that, and then sugar shot through the roof. So the issue is cultural evolution, technology shot through the roof. Our biological evolution, we haven't changed. 10,000 years is not enough for biological evolution to catch up. So we're essentially hunter-gatherers living in the space age from a biological, genetic point of view. So just to give you guys some perspective on 2 million years, 10,000 years, this is a football field. 99.5 plus yards of the field are going to represent 2.5 million years, and then 10,000 years would be the 14-inch line. Okay, so it's an eat this, not that diet. The problem with a lot of diets is they require counting calories, restricting calories, keeping track of points. All that stuff isn't sustainable. Okay, you're not going to do that for your whole life. So the idea behind this diet is that you surround yourself by the right foods, and you let your body and your mind kind of decide what it wants to eat. And we see a more sustainable weight loss, and something you can keep up forever. So what's in it? Real food, whole foods, single ingredient stuff. Okay, we have meat, fruits and vegetables, natural oils, some nuts. To break that down, meat, this is going to be wild-caught seafood, grass-fed meat, free-range poultry and eggs. Fruits and vegetables, I want you guys to think a lot of variety, color under vegetables. Important note here, roots and tubers, carrots, sweet potatoes, taro. These are going to be the major source of carbohydrates on the diet. So a mistake people make if they were to do like a paleo diet is they end up way too low carb. And if you're too low carb, I mean, carbohydrates are necessary for your body. So if you're too low carb, then it's not sustainable. You're eventually going to need those carbohydrates. So main source are coming from roots and tubers rather than grains and sugar. Natural oils, 3 natural oils that we like to promote are coconut oil, grass-fed butter, and olive oil. Okay. So you're getting rid of mainly the vegetable oils. All right, so what we're taking out, what we're trying to limit is our sugar intake. We're trying to limit the vegetable oils that we're eating, grains and legumes, we'll go into that, processed artificial foods, and dairy with some exceptions there. So you see, as compared to the average American diet, it's more fat, less carbohydrate, equal amount of protein. Big common misconception of evolutionary-based diets is that you're eating excessive amounts of meat. It's not that case. The base of your pyramid is still fruits and vegetables, and those root vegetables. But we've done a flip-flop of, almost a perfect flip-flop of carbs and fat as your energy source. We'll get into that. All these foods are nutrient-dense foods. So our appetite, our hunger is driven by 2 things. It's driven by the need for energy, and it's driven by the need for nutrients. So think vitamins and minerals. So if you eat a diet that's nutrient poor, your appetite's going to stay elevated. Your body will elevate your appetite, your hunger, when it needs, let's say, vitamin A. And it's going to keep it elevated to get you searching for vitamin A. And you might get all to the bottom of that bag of potato chips looking for vitamin A, and it's not there, okay? And your hunger stays up. So these foods are going to be packed with not only the energy you need, but the nutrients. So again, to curb that hunger. So what's in it for you? I'm going to try to convince you guys that this is going to reduce inflammation. It's going to manage your appetite, your things like insulin sensitivity. It's going to optimize that weight, and it's going to help you mentally, physically, as well as reduce those chronic illnesses, diseases. Inflammation. So inflammation is a word that's thrown around a ton. It's cited as a cause for a number of conditions, but not a lot of people have a full picture of what inflammation means. So I'm going to try to explain that, because it's not all bad. Can you do that? So inflammation is a natural response that the body turns on in response to something harmful. It represents your body trying to heal itself. It represents your body trying to remove a toxin or remove something from your system, whether it's an infection or whatever. So when you have a cut, a cold, your body responds with acute inflammation. So acute inflammation is really good. It has a distinct beginning, it has a distinct purpose, and then it has an end. Okay? The problem is when inflammation becomes chronic. So chronic inflammation, think lower levels of inflammation, but hanging out all the time, okay? And kind of having a systemic effect, versus if you have a cut, you have inflammation right around that injured area. The chronic systemic refers to those low levels, full body responses. It's inflammation in your blood, in your blood vessels, and it's been linked to a ton of disease. So how can we manage this chronic inflammation? Well, it's becoming more and more apparent that the source of chronic inflammation is coming from what we're eating. So I'm suggesting that we reduce the foods that promote inflammation, the inflammatory foods, and then increase the foods that are anti-inflammatory. Simple as that. So some examples are going to be decreasing grains, legumes, vegetables, omega-6 fatty acids, we'll get into that, and increasing the good fatty fish, salmon, stuff like that, omega-3 foods, and then fruits and vegetables, which are loaded with antioxidants, molecules that fight inflammation. Okay, so why get rid of grains from our diet? I want to start by saying that grains, hunter-gatherers ate grains, but it was very low. It wasn't the main source of their calories. The issue comes when you make grains the bulk of your calories, which is common in the United States and in the world. We get 50% of our calories worldwide from grains. And if you're eating them occasionally, you're going to be all right. But if you're eating them for every meal, some of these issues become big issues. So a grain is a seed, the seeds of grasses. So grass doesn't have a lot of defenses. It can't run away. It doesn't have things like thorns. So the way that grass protects its seeds, which are its future, its survival as a species, is it makes its grains toxic, these seeds toxic. It makes it hard to digest by mammals. So we see two substances in grains, phytate and lectins. You can Google these terms. I put up some research if you ever hear them thrown around. They're referred to as anti-nutrients. They are basically just the chemicals that the grain or the bean is producing to make its seed difficult to digest. The goal is that a mammal can come along, eat all this grass with seeds included, and the seeds can make it through the digestive system, be extruded in a pile of manure, and then grow a new plant. So the issue is when we just only eat the grains. And if you were to eat a handful of raw wheat or a handful of raw black beans, legumes, you would have intense gastrointestinal discomfort. You'd feel that inflammation. But when we cook and process these foods, we lower that inflammation, or we lower those toxins, but we don't bring them to zero. We just kind of lower them to where you can't really feel it acutely unless you're really sensitive. Some people they have gluten intolerance or celiac disease. Those people can feel it, but most of us, it's kind of lower level inflammation because we've lowered it through processing. But what happens is toxins are still there, and they're causing the chronic inflammation because they are toxic, and our body responds with inflammation. I thought I would touch on gluten because that's something you guys I'm sure, hear all the time. Gluten is just the protein component of grains, not only wheat, barley, sorghum, and it functions on a spectrum. We have people with celiac disease, which are 0.5% of our population. Their response to gluten is they produce full body systemic antibodies. So their bodies really see this as something that's hurting them. So they form these antibodies, systemic inflammation, really intense stuff like joint pain. Then further down the spectrum, we see people who are gluten intolerant. So they're feeling it, but it's lower level. And then you have people that don't really feel it. But again, it's all on a spectrum. So the concern here is that you're not feeling it, but it could be causing this lower level chronic inflammation, and could be contributing to the long list of diseases that I threw up there. So the other reason we take grains out is they allow us to have a high carb dominated diet. Fall asleep or something?
There it is. All right.
Okay, good. Okay, vegetable oils. These you can think of these as almost like concentrated grains or beans. Soybean oil, canola oil, safflower oil. They're extracted from grains and legumes using industrial processes, extreme heat and pressure. And they became popular just in the 20th century. So lately they've been linked to increases in cardiovascular disease, liver disease, cancer, obesity, and overall mortality, like universally. And all of these issues are centered around the fact that they concentrate omega-6 fatty acid. It's just a type of fat. It's used by your body, but if you have too much of it, it becomes a trigger for inflammation.
No. He's going in and out.
Try. Nicole, try moving closer to the receiver's actually over here in the corner.
Oh,
It could be
there
that
you
you're
go.
on the edge of the,
There she
Oh,
goes.
yeah.
could be close to the edge of the.
Okay. So you have most of us heard of omega-3s, right? Like things like fish oil supplements. You take them because they have good omega-3s and they're anti-inflammatory, and they are. And you see this interaction between omega-3 in your body and omega-6. Both are crucial, again, because inflammation is crucial. One turns it on, one turns it off. Omega-6 is turning inflammation on, omega-3 is turning it off. The ultimate source of omega-3 is algae and green plants. So it gets concentrated higher up the food chain in fish, because you guys know how that works. The smaller fish are eating the algae. Things like salmon eating the smaller fish, and they have a lot of omega-3s. The ultimate source of omega-6 is seeds. So it gets accumulated in, obviously, seed oil, but also animals that are grain-fed. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a proponent of grass-fed. So the optimal ratio for our health is predicted to be about 3-to-1 in favor of omega-3s. What we see in the average American is a ratio that's about 1-to-3, so almost perfectly flipped. And this is attributed to those vegetable oils mainly, these things that are concentrating the omega-6. So that poor ratio promotes inflammation. Aspirin and ibuprofen, they block the conversion of omega-6 into inflammatory hormone. So just to give you an idea, so omega-6, when you've got some sort of stimulus, your body's going to turn those guys into the inflammatory response. And omega-3 has the opposite effect. So when this ratio is thrown off, we essentially have a hair trigger on our inflammatory response. We have a hair trigger, and then there's no safety, there's no off. So you have this pro-inflammatory environment. To touch on dairy, dairy is something that I think becomes more of a personal thing for people, and I want you guys to do your own research, but basically there's a split going on because the fat components of dairy have been linked to cancer fighting, heart disease fighting. The fat component has a ton of A, D, and K. These are fat-soluble vitamins, and the Americans are, as a population, deficient in those vitamins. So, possible link to why the fat component is cancer fighting. And then the carbohydrate component, unfortunately, is linked to inflammation. The carbohydrate component is lactose. 65% of the world is lactose intolerant and knows it. That other percentage is possibly, again, sensitive, but doesn't really know it. And there is a portion of the world that's tolerant to lactose. They've just been consuming it so intensely over the 10,000 years that it became this huge factor. If you could hold on to your lactose enzyme, lactase, it was that beneficial. But the spectrum that I look at as if the fat component is good, carbohydrate component possibly dangerous for you, then this would be your spectrum. Butter is pure fat, part of dairy. This is going to be majority fat, and then down the line to skim milk, which has no fat but has all the lactose. Okay, processed and artificials. This is an easy one. If it's a chemical, if you can't pronounce it, your body probably doesn't know what it is either. All right, so it responds to anything foreign with an inflammatory response. Just to be sure. So those anti-inflammatory foods, already mentioned them, that we're trying to increase to work on that balance between omega-3, omega-6. Going to be fruits and vegetables, grass-fed meat, free-range eggs, wild-caught fish, and then one of the few supplements that I do recommend is the omega-3 fish oil. You can't. I mean, it's across the board has shown to really help in things like heart disease. So, this is an interesting part because this is where we bring in things like politics, and you guys might be more experts on that area than me, this kind of interaction between parties. So in the 1950s and 60s, there was this attack of saturated fat. Now we see the result of that. The USDA promotes a low-fat diet. And if you're going to lower fat, you got to replace that with something. So it's a low-fat, high-carb diet. But we're going to kind of tap into what exactly happened in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. So throughout the 20th century, we see this rapid increase in heart disease. People are dying of heart attacks left and right. There's a panic. All right, what's causing this heart attack? These heart attacks. So people are rushing for answers, and we see in the 50s and 60s a hypothesis emerge. A guy named Ansel Keys is the father of this diet heart hypothesis, and basically this was his line of thought. when we get into these plaques that are developing people's hearts, they're full of cholesterol. So therefore, he says high blood cholesterol must cause cardiovascular disease. And then he also comes to the assumption that, well, then dietary sources of cholesterol are raising that blood cholesterol, and therefore avoid dietary sources of cholesterol. Saturated fats are dietary sources of cholesterol, and any other dietary source of cholesterol. Does that make sense? Did I confuse that? Okay. Okay, and then this hypothesis was backed by a famous study, and then eventually the USDA in 1971 with their low-fat recommendations. Okay, so here's what happened. We listened. We really did listen. The consumption of animal fat, saturated fat is the main component in animal fat, dropped. We stopped eating butter. We started eating vegetable oils instead, margarine instead, stuff like that. And go to the next slide. What else happened? Well, obesity shot up. You see right here, this is when those low-fat guidelines were put in place. And, as I showed earlier, heart disease stayed relatively stable. Definitely didn't get back down here at all. So what the heck? What the hell happened? So in the 90s, okay, stuff starts reversing. Truth revealed. Ansel Keys goes back on his hypothesis. He says, there's no connection whatsoever between cholesterol in the food and cholesterol in the blood, and we've known that all along. Cholesterol in the diet doesn't matter unless you happen to be a chicken or a rabbit. So all the studies that backed his hypothesis were done on chickens and rabbits, and chickens and rabbits don't eat animal fat. So something's going to go wrong if you feed them animal fat. Seems kind of obvious to me, but so he's just broken the link between dietary sources of cholesterol raising your blood cholesterol. And this makes sense on another stage because when cholesterol is crucial in your body. It's the building blocks for all your sex hormones. It's the major component in the structural integrity of your cell membranes. And if you have a diet low in cholesterol, your liver will produce more cholesterol. And then vice versa. If you have a diet high in cholesterol, your liver produces less cholesterol. It needs to keep it stable. And then that second part of the equation that if you do end up with high cholesterol in your blood, that it causes heart disease, was shot down. So this is the Journal of the American Medical Association in 1994. They went back on some of their findings. They said, our findings do not support the hypotheses that hypercholesteremia, high cholesterol in your blood, or low HDL, that's a form of cholesterol, are important. That's a form of healthy, that's your healthy cholesterol, are important risk factors for all-cause mortality, coronary heart disease, etc. So they went back on their original hypotheses. The problem is that it was kind of too late. Now we have this entrenched. We have a lot of companies who are making a lot of money off their low-fat products. It's a slow change process, become entrenched. One more thing, and this is going to segue me into my little discussion on carbohydrates. So when they said no fats, they had to replace it with something, so they said more carbohydrates. So a huge proponent of this was a past president of the American College of Cardiology. He loved that hypothesis. He was all pumped up about it. And then in 2004, we see him release an article critiquing his own hypothesis. He says he's bound by his definition of criticism, that he has to do what's right for the world. And he makes this statement. The low-fat, high-carb diet may well have played an unintended role in the current epidemic of obesity, lipid abnormalities, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and this diet can no longer be defended by appeal to the authority of prestigious medical organizations. So, what happens when you replace fat in your diet with carbohydrate? So, that's what this diagram's here for. And I know it might be hard to see, but I'll try to talk it out as well. So, basically, a diet high in carbs is what's throwing off our ability to manage our appetite. A high carb diet causes diabetes, and eventually a high carb diet contributes to obesity. So what happens is when you consume a carbohydrate, let's say, and all carbohydrates, whether it be sugar, bread, or vegetables, eventually get converted into a molecule called glucose. But sugar is going to rush into the body. A bunch of glucose is going to immediately enter your bloodstream, versus vegetables take a long time to digest, and they kind of trickle in. So if you're eating, let's say you're eating white bread at high glycemic index, all this glucose is rushing into your bloodstream from your intestines. Your body responds. It senses that glucose in your bloodstream, and it releases a little hormone called insulin, hormone involved in diabetes. What insulin does is it hits a little channel, little gate on your cell. We'll say this is like muscle cell, and it opens that gate, allowing glucose to enter. Once glucose enters, it goes through a couple of transforming steps, and it goes to the powerhouse of your cell, and gets turned into ATP, which is just energy. So if you're in the middle of a workout or a marathon, or you're having to churn out a ton of energy, this is good. It's just going to drive. It's going to keep going. You have an energy need, so the system keeps driving through. The problem is when you're not in the middle of a marathon, which is the majority of the time, this becomes met almost immediately, and it starts going backwards. And the first place it goes as a backup is it gets turned into what's called glycogen. It's just your body has the ability to store about 1,000 calories worth of glucose as glycogen. It's just a bunch of those glucose molecules linked together. So your body can store some, but it's only 1,000 calories worth. So most of us don't fully deplete this source. You probably wake up with, 800 calories worth, unless you did run a marathon the day before. And you fill this up with a bagel and a Starbucks coffee. And so what happens once they're filled up? Well, we got to do something with this sticky glucose, because it's sugar. It's real sticky, and it gums up the inside of our cell. And it gets turned into fatty acids. It gets turned into fat. So our fat cells are where we dump excess carbohydrate. So right here you see how carbs turn into fat. Lots of people think fat makes you fat. Well, no, the carbohydrate gets dumped. Very simple pathway, just immediately can be converted into fat. Another issue is that as long as this insulin's in your bloodstream, you can't use any fat that you already have stored. So what happens with people who do not have a good relationship with carbohydrate, do not have a good sensitivity to insulin, is they're eating a high carb diet. They constantly have this insulin in their bloodstream, and they can't metabolize their stored fat. So in between meals, you get hungry faster, because as long as there's insulin in your bloodstream, you can't use what energy you have stored. So that's a problem with a high carb diet. What happens when you eat a lot of saturated fat, a lot of fats in general, is one, you become satiated faster. Fats are more fats fill you up more than carbohydrate. You guys probably have had a spoonful of something rich, and you can feel it. It's you feel full versus you can just snack on like chips or pretzels all day, and it doesn't really hit the sensors in your stomach. So one, it's more satiating, and then two, some will be used for energy right away, some will be stored, but in between your meals, because you've never released that excessive insulin from eating excessive amounts of carbs and whatnot, the stuff that is stored in between meals can supply you longer, so you stay full longer. You don't have to eat as often. Okay, that's almost done, so we can do questions. So again, then we have all the research that's coming out to support this. The most recent study was actually released in September of this year by the National Institute of Health, saying that indeed the low-carb, higher-fat diets resulted in more weight loss, an average of, I think it was 8 pounds of weight loss for people that, no calorie restriction, just eating more fat and less carbs. And then those cardiovascular markers, stuff like that, was either improved or kind of unchanged. So the saturated fat wasn't causing any cardiovascular risk. The hunger, mood, energy, focus, all that's tied into that carb relationship. This represents your blood sugar. As the blood sugar goes up and down, high carb, you eat a bunch of sugar, bagel, it shoots up, and then in between meals crashes down and you get hungry and you need more of it. That leads to an unsteady mood. It'll literally cause mood swings. And we see a drain of energy and a drain of focus during those times. Okay, so real quick, just before questions. That was so much to do in like 45 minutes. But you guys are going to get the presentation too, and under each slide I have a bunch of extra resources. Just to calm your nerves, it can be simplified to eating real food, stuff that looks like food, stuff that's been minimally messed with before you consume it. Eating more fat and less carbs. Looking at this as a new picture of healthy, so not all of us, you might say you eat healthy, but that means that sometimes you screw up, and that's fine. It's just, if you're interested in eating healthy, you should at least have the right picture of what that looks like. Planning and preparation are going to be key because, again, the default in this country is quite the opposite of this stuff. And if you don't plan ahead, you have to grab stuff quick, it's going to have some of those foods that are hurting us. The final step is personalized. Maybe start very strict and then kind of see what works best for you, because we all have a slightly different genes, slightly different background. So yeah, that's what I got.
Does anyone have any questions for Michael?
So.
Oh, question, no, yes.
So people who have made a list of paleo alcohols, they say wine, mead, which is made from honey, hard cider. Am I missing anything? Kombucha is an alcoholic tea. Would be better, but I would never say that alcohol is good for you. It's not. But they do say that actually one glass of wine a day has been linked to lower heart disease. So yeah, the alcohol, the preference is going to be wine, and those other things, mead. Interesting thing about beer is that the fermentation process actually lowers some of the gluten in beer. They think that's how medieval people survived, because they were drinking so much beer.
So what was causing the spike in the heart issues in the 50s if it wasn't the high-fat diets?
So now the what they're contributing heart disease to is inflammation. Inflammation causes the initial damage to the blood vessel, causes that rupture, and then what happens to get caught up in it is the cholesterol that they found in the plaque. I know you had a question, right? Yeah.
You had mentioned grass-fed butter. What is that exactly? Is it an organic?
It's there's one brand that they sell in Publix and everywhere. It's called Kerrygold.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just butter made from the milk of cows that only eat grass rather than eating corn and grain.
What do you think about chia seeds?
I actually read an interesting article on chia. I used to have them, still have them every once in a while. Is like something I eat during like workouts or hiking. But they are seeds, and they do have some of that stuff going on. So I would say if you really like them, maybe like limited use, try them out, and then look up the research, because it's a little bit back and forth on it. Yeah. No.
Do you have any kind of like, I don't cook much, I hate cooking, so advice for, if you are on the go, I mean, are there some options out there, whether they be, you know, a sub place or anything that's Panera bread or something that is okay, or a salad from McDonald's, I'm assuming is okay. As long as you choose the right dressing.
Yeah, I mean, it really is hard. It's really hard, and in the restaurants, what find its way into everything is a vegetable oil. They just cook with vegetable oils all the time. The salad dressing have the vegetable oils. It's tough. I like Chipotle a lot because they have some good options. So that's like my go-to if I have to grab something. Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't actually been there yet.
Yeah.
Good. Fresh Kitchen.
It's supposedly a slightly healthier Chipotle than, you know,
Sounds
their
about
sort of thing.
Mm.
Whether it is or not, I don't know. But it is good.
Cool.
Susan, you got a question. I had a question, because it is confusing. I mean, you have someone, come up to you and say, oh, you should take probiotics, you should take fish oil, you should, so until recently I wasn't taking anything.
Uh-huh.
A friend of mine said, well, get, 50 billion probiotics, okay? So I go to Walgreens and I get the 50 billion. And then someone in the store says, well, you should take fish oil. So can you take both of them? I mean, how do you know, without taking like a list of 50 things, I mean, what would be a good, healthy, I mean, everyone says fish oil, but does everyone say probiotics and fish oil? And, I mean, how do you all...
Well, the two don't interact per se. But along the lines of just supplements, both fish oil and probiotics, you can get that from foods. That would be your number one source, because it's easy to get carried away with supplements, but they're really not the best source. They're not as available to our bodies.
So it's better to have yogurt and salmon than to...
Correct. Yeah, probiotics are key because they're a huge protective mechanism. I eat a lot of kimchi, fermented vegetables.
I don't think I'm going to eat you.
Yeah. Stick with yogurt, but no added sugar. That would be my recommendation for that. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned eating fruits and vegetables. Does it matter? I mean, obviously raw might be best, but can you steam the vegetables? Without destroying any of the value?
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of people talk about like, oh, you can't buy anything that's already cut up and all that. Those are like small details. Like there's people that aren't even eating fruits and vegetables to begin with. So that would be your like when you're getting into the details, yeah, you could possibly optimize by low and slow. Low heat, longer times is kind of better across the board. Steaming rather than like grilling or in a pan is a little bit better.
What about juicing? You know, it extracts all the pulp. What is that? The juice itself leave you with much of benefit?
The problem with juicing a fruit versus eating a fruit is it raises its glycemic index. So the fiber in the fruit is what slows down that release of glucose. So if you take that out, it's more of that fast hit that like sugar is going to provide. You'd still get some nutrients, but it would come with this higher, hit. Yeah. Yeah, so I would, I put whole wheat flour on the same level as white flour, pretty much. It's slightly higher glycemic index, but all the same toxins and inflammatory issues. But you can avoid using grain flour, and
I use almond flour a lot. You can also use coconut flour. I make a ton of like paleo desserts and breads. It's just a matter of using the right ingredients. So yeah, it's just using different flours, and you can find them at any of the grocery stores. So almond flour is a good one. Sometimes you have to add a little bit more because they're not as dense. So there's a ton of recipes online, and just kind of like playing with it as well. So at first it might be a little challenging to figure out how much, but you can certainly substitute those.
Cool.
I had a question about the oils that you mentioned. I have to say, I never thought I'd see lard on the good list.
Yeah.
Does it matter how these are prepared, particularly like olive oils, or just any olive oil that you're going to take off the shelf is considered a good oil?
You want to be concerned about the heat. So the coconut oil is for higher heat stuff. The problem with butter and olive oil, the good thing, one of the reasons people like the vegetable oil is it didn't burn until really high temperatures. And so the butter and olive oil have that issue with high temperatures. They burn, and then that's carcinogenic. So coconut oil for the high temperatures. Beyond that,
Or more so, I guess my question too is just the olive oil
like,
that's pressed and all these different
right.
types. Is it better?
I go with extra virgin, like a little bit less processing, less high heat.
Okay.
You're talking a lot about the added carbs to food. Is added sugar, is that the big thing to watch out for? It seems like I watched that documentary on sugar that just came out. What was that called?
Fed Up.
And it talked about the sugar, and it kind of tracked a lot of what you were saying.
Yeah.
And so is that a big thing that you watch for? Like I used to eat Greek yogurt all the time. You look at it and the amount of sugar they put in that stuff, and all of a sudden you realize, well, this is really bad. So is that something you recommend avoiding? High sugar?
Absolutely. Any added sugar. Fruit has sugar, but it's not added sugar. So any added sugar. And there's a really good James Oliver, talk show host guy, just did a really funny section on sugar. And they're actually thinking about the government is trying to get across the ability to have an added sugar category on your nutrient label, which would be really helpful. But the beverage and the industry doesn't like that. So.
What about artificial sweeteners? Do you ever take some of those or other plant-based sweeteners, stevia or stuff like that?
Mm-hmm. So
Don't avoid it, it's a process.
These are obviously 0 calories. All these artificial sweeteners people like them because they're 0 calories. But what's coming out as the possible issue with them is that they're still your consumption of them is still being like linked to being overweight and obese, and what's going on is your brain still releases some insulin in response to those foods, so it's still sweet, and so it kind of confuses your body. And again, as long as you have some insulin in your blood, you have a harder time using stored body fat. So they're thinking it has this correlation because it's linked with a lack of, like, it increases appetite. And then aspartame or aspartame, whatever you want to call it, that's been linked to cancer. So I avoid it, but that's something definitely to dive in and check out. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody, but if it's something that you need, then maybe that's how you personalize and you say it's all right, worth the risk.
Just out of curiosity, what's a typical day's meal for you?
Okay. So let's see. If I have time in the morning, then I'm doing a bunch of sautéed spinach and then scrambled eggs with the spinach. And then I'll do my breakfast and then coffee. Yeah, the whole egg. Okay. Yeah, the whole egg. If I don't have time, I'm making some sort of like smoothie type thing. And then lunch will be, what am I doing nowadays? Like, lots of times I'll try to just do leftovers from dinner. And so if I don't have it, I'm grabbing like a salad, or I have to go to something from Chipotle, I'll do that. But the bulk of what I'm eating is, my plate looks like, you take your average American plate, let's say like hamburgers and like fries and then vegetable. I get rid of the bun, rid of the fries, put like a bunch of salsa on the burger, and then butter on the vegetables. Like, that's starting to be what it looks like. So, yeah, I eat a lot of sweet potatoes. I eat a lot of grass-fed ground beef. Right now, I'm just eating venison because I was lucky enough to get a deer over winter break. So I'm eating some venison, which is the ultimate like grass-fed. But yeah, I'm trying to do a lot of grass-fed ground beef, salmon, stuff like that. It's hard. I don't really have like a good average day. Yeah. Water, yeah. That's the only thing.
Any other questions?
Cool. Yeah, we'll send out the presentation and then also a couple resources for things like recipes and
Oh, wonderful.
Do you recommend it?
Perfect Health Diet.
Those pretty much go along the same line as the presentation?
Yeah, I think it's a great book. Obviously, it is a little bit like dense. Like it can be. Did you start reading it? No. Okay. It's a. I mean, you have to. Is there a lawyer version? I think start at their website before you buy the book, perfecthealthdiet.com. And then, yeah, it's definitely manageable. It's just loaded with research and science stuff. It's not like it's more of a textbook. And there's some other books that are really good that are quicker reads. You might want to start there on.
I think we're just going to go to Nicole every time.
Yeah. But it is my favorite book if I had to just pick one on the subject.
Well, thank you very much, Michael.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.